Hey guys, what's cracking? It's Krakenation here. I'm coming at you guys today with the next installment. It's been a while of Team Building University. This has always been a really popular series on my channel. It's one of my favorites to do, and I'm really excited to start bringing you guys these videos again. So this next one is going to be talking about how to build your team's defensive cores. Now, we'd already made a video on offense cores. Hopefully, guys, you found that video really helpful. If you haven't, make sure to go and check that video out in the playlist. You'll be able to find it. But for every offensive core we've got in the metagame, we've got to have that defensive core. So today, that's what we're going to be talking about. How you can use defensive cores, how you can build with them, how you can make your own, what you can look for, keep an eye on, and what kinds there are, how you can support them. All of these different things are going to be crucial to your understanding of how to build a good defensive core. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at it, all right? So this first thing we're going to have to think about is what is a defensive core, all right? So a defensive core is a group of Pokemon capable of synergizing defensively on multiple levels, hopefully. But this can be pretty basic. This can literally just be one's a physical wall, one's a specially defensive wall. So one that I use in a draft league that I was once in, that I had a lot of success with, was in Generation 6, albeit a while ago. Things have changed, but not that much has changed. The principles haven't. I had a lot of success with Alomola plus Snorlax. Alomola is a really great physically defensive Pokemon. It's got Regenerator and Wish, so it can keep itself healthy and its teammates. And I could Wish Pass into my Snorlax, which is a great specially defensive Pokemon, but doesn't have recovery. So that was, but there's no actual typing synergies there, if you realize. No resistances or weaknesses covered. They just were good partners. So you can be as simple as stats. It can go a little bit one step further. You can go into typing, so you know if a Pokemon has a fire weakness or a ground weakness like Heatran could be a really good partner for something with a ground immunity, for example. That's one step. I don't like, for example, Heatran and Skarmory in Generation 6 and Generation 7 were really good partners because Heatran was weak to fighting, which Skarmory could potentially beat. It was weak to ground very largely, and Skarmory could take on the ground weaknesses, but Skarmory in turn was weak to fire, so Heatran's Flash Fire can come in. It was a really nice partner. Just one of many possible defensive cores you can work around. That's a dual steel core. Take from that what you will. But you can go into typing. You can even go one step further. You can look at regenerator cores, for example, or pivot defensive cores. Those are one step further, but those are more of like a individual Pokemon because there's not enough regenerator Pokemon for that to be a type of core. But for example, something like Tangrowth plus your like Slowking RU core times of old. Slowbro plus Tangrowth could be a UU core back in the day. Those are all, or OU even, those are all potentially really viable cores that really backbone on Regenerator. But if you notice, there's also some typing synergy there because Tangrowth's weak to fire and ice. Slowbro resists both of those. Slowbro weak to electric. Tangrowth resists that. You know, you've got some typing synergy there. So that's a potentially really viable defensive core. Now, albeit that one is particularly weak to special attackers, so you need to make sure you're supporting your defensive cores well. So we're going to go into all of this in a lot more detail later in the video, I should say, so stay tuned. But what I've been alluding to is that what one Pokemon may be weak to, another that group may be resistant to, whether that's a certain type of attack or a certain like special or physical attack, something like that, or maybe one does, like in the case of Snorlax, doesn't have recovery, and Alomola has recovery at the wazoo because it's Regenerator and Wish, so you can heal it up. So that's what you got to kind of keep in mind there, okay? What one is weak to, when you're building a defensive core, you're really going to look for pieces that come together to complete a whole defensive backbone, is a term I'm going to use a lot in this video. So if something is weak to fire, you want to pair it with maybe a fire resistance like Tangrowth and Slowbro, for example. That's kind of what the things you're looking for are. So let's go ahead and take a look now at why defensive cores are important. Why should you be watching this video? What is the reason why this stuff is going to be helpful to your competitive Pokemon battling? First up, like I talked about just now, a term I'm going to keep bringing up and again, is that they can form a backbone of any balanced or defensively oriented team. Obviously, hyper-offensive teams don't have defensive backbones because why would you switch into your defensive Pokemon on a hyper-offensive team? But a hyper-offensive team is more about keeping pace, so we're going to focus more on balance, maybe some bulky offense, and stall teams today. So they can form a backbone. So what I really like about defensive cores, you know, a well-built defensive core on a team that really supports it well, and the team that it supports well, is that, let's say you're kind of looking to your win con is a sweeper later down the line. You know you have to remove your opponent's one Pokemon. What you can do is you can play with your defensive core when you can try to get chip damage. You can try to use maybe a wall breaker, and then when your wall breaker is threatened, fall back into maybe it's a Rotom Wash. It's going to be your defensive core here, part of your defensive core. You can fall back onto that. Maybe your Kyurem is really afraid of a fairy type attack, so you've got a Corviknight in the back as part of your defensive core that you can fall back on. But when the Pokemon on the Corviknight Rotom Heat switches into that, maybe your Corviknight can U-turn out into your Seismitoad, and all of a sudden Corviknight plus Seismitoad has become a really, really, really effective defensive core there. So that's kind of the stuff you want to look for, and it's going to be a backbone of any kind of team. So as you kind of may have noticed, I talked about Kyurem there. Your Kyurem can fall back onto that when it needs to, and then come back out when the moment is safe. Slow pivots are really helpful in the situation, and therefore what you're basically doing is you're helping your opponent you're helping yourself prevent your opponent from gaining too much offensive pressure, too much offensive momentum. You're helping to slow them down. These slow pivots can really help for that. These slow defensive pivots like Corviknight or Tangrowth, or Days of Old, I should say, or in things like, what was I just thinking of? Rotom Heat, defensive Rotom Heat, or defensive Rotom Wash. These are really good Pokemon for this particular role. Maybe like even a regenerate Pokemon like Toxapex, or a Pokemon that can come in on a physical attacker and do a lot of damage with Rocky Helmet and Iron Barb and Ferrothorn. You know, they can stop your opponent's pressure really quickly and try to help you revert the course of the match. And so by doing this, things like these slow pivots, you can ease switches and your predictions. It's kind of nice to be able to go into the defensive pivot or defensive Pokemon and be like, ooh, okay, a little bit of pressure is off me right now. I can make a safe prediction. Maybe I can just go for my rocks, or I can just click the Thunder Wave, and we can make an easier, safer middle ground play that's going to be harder to punish and try to gain some pressure back, because right now I'm playing on the back foot, and that's why the defensive teams are okay playing on the back foot for a little bit, because they can always hope that their defensive Pokemon can make a safe middle ground play and start to reverse the tide of the match. So, looking at some different types of defensive cores, the ones that I want to primarily talk about today are stall cores, which focus on not having any offensive pressure, obviously, but simply stopping your opponent's momentum and weathering any storm. And the other type being tank cores, which is more of like kind of like an offensively oriented defensive core, which sounds weird and a little contradictory in premise, but basically the point here is like there are Pokemon that are capable of putting offensive pressure on while being defensive Pokemon. And so these are the things that we can try to use to reverse momentum, really. So like I was saying earlier, you know, sometimes with these defensive cores, we're trying to reverse momentum. In case of a stall core, not quite as much. We're trying to just kind of fall back on it, and that's kind of our whole plan, is our whole team might be a defensive core for playing a true stall team. So keep that in mind. So examples of a stall core that I want to talk about. The first one I've got here is Corviknight plus Clefable. So Corviknight plus Clefable is a really, really versatile core. Both these Pokemon can operate in different roles. So in this case, you could run, for example, like a Roost, U-turn, Defog, Iron-headed Body Press, Corviknight, and then maybe a Wish, Teleport, Thunderwave, Moonblast, Clefable, and now you've self-sufficient defensive core, a stall core. That core, as you can kind of guess by what I just said, has really very little ways and means of offensive pressure, but it can just be you can fall back on it. Clefable can offer some Wish support. Corviknight can offer some Defog support. So maybe for a bulky balance team, this could be a really great defensive core to fall back on in a pinch. Another example here that's a 3 Pokemon core that I want to talk about is Mandibuzz, Toxapex, Ferrothorn. So obviously you've got a little bit of a weakness to the ground type with Toxapex, so Mandibuzz covers that. Got a bit of a weakness to electric, so Ferrothorn covers that. So these Pokemon as a trio all kind of operate nicely together, and so you've got a lot of access to hazard stacking. You've got between Spikes and Toxic Spikes. You've got Defogger and Mandibuzz, so you might want to keep that in mind that you might not want this to be your Defogger. Mandibuzz can click Foul Play, it can click U-turn, and then bring in your Toxapex. You can get regenerator boosts. So this core has some nice synergy here, and it's really going to be a more well fleshed out version of a core above. The core above is kind of just sits back, but what's nice about this core down below is that it's a little more fleshed out. It kind of has more of a self-sufficiency to it. It does things on its own. But it is still, in essence, a stall core, because without Foul Play, Mandibuzz is doing nothing. Toxapex is very, very defensive. Really does not do much, but you can run like a Haze set, and then you're really becoming an effective stall Pokemon. Haze, Recover, maybe Toxic Spikes or Toxic, something like that. Scald, you know, these are not moves that from Toxapex are going to do much damage, but they're going to be a good part of your defensive core. So let's take a look at what kind of team you can fit these stall archetype defensive cores into. So obviously, stall teams are going to appreciate stall cores, goes without saying, right? Most semi-stall teams as well, what the team you just saw on the bottom there with Mandibuzz, Ferrothorn, and Toxapex could fit into a semi-stall team. Now again, these are just examples. Take from that what you will. Try to flesh out your own ideas. I really highly encourage you to experiment and try different things. This is just some stuff that I'm giving you guys to start with. Some bulky balance teams will appreciate stall cores. Not a ton. But you know, if you're playing a really defensively oriented balance team, you might be able to fit a stall core in there, and then a few balance teams will still, even fewer still, but occasionally you might be able to fit a stall core. But the problem when you play balance and you run a pure stall core like that is that you're giving up a lot of pressure really quickly. So that I wouldn't run, for example, those bottom 3 on a bounce because that's too much of my team allocated to running a stall core, but I might consider something like a Corviknight Clefable as part of a balanced team and then run some more offensive pressure on my others because my defensive core is self-sufficient within 2 Pokemon, and then I'm not having to run, you know, even more defensive Pokemon on top of that, and then making my team really, at that point, you're not running a balanced team, you're running a bulky team, you're running maybe something closer to semi-stall or something like that. So just keep that in mind. And does not stall cores, like I said, they don't work in any kind of offensively oriented team because you're just giving up too much pressure. You're never going to be playing, you're always going to be playing off the back foot with those kind of cores to a certain extent. And offensive teams are not looking to do that, so that's never really going to work. So now I want to talk about tank cores, and these are kind of more what I build around when I can play competitive Pokemon. But the first example I want to talk about is actually Corviknight and Clefable, because I kind of wanted to make this little trick here for you guys, because Corviknight and Clefable can really double into tanks as well, because they aren't Pokemon that are offensively useless. If you made that a bulk up Body Press or Iron Head or Brave Bird, and then Roost, and then maybe you go for like Taunt or Sub, and then something like Defog you could still do, I don't know. But you can make your Corviknight a really effective defensive tank instead of just a wall, and all of a sudden you're exerting offensive pressure with the Corviknight. It's not nothing in the match. Same goes for Clefable. What if you ran Calm Mind and then Flamethrower, Moonblast, Soft Boiled? All of a sudden your Clefable still operates somewhat defensively, maybe not as good as the set we just talked about before, but now it can beat Corviknights and maybe Ferrothorns out there that were previously walling it, and all of a sudden it's more of a tank, and it can do some work offensively, and it's not dead weight. It can maybe even be, either of these Pokemon could be a win con in a pinch, so all of a sudden your tank core can fit into more offensive teams while still maybe not being quite as specialized at being defensive, but being capable of being a good defensive core at the same time. Another example here is Seismitoad plus Togekiss. Togekiss can give you some. These partners mostly work in a defensive synergy typing setting, I should say. So Seismitoad obviously being weak to grass type, Togekiss can come in on any powerful grass moves or anything that you fear like that. I think this core gets pretty broken down by Zeraora. Keep that in mind. So if you use the core like this, you want to make sure you can beat Zeraora in other ways. But Togekiss then also fears those, those electric types, those poison type moves, and steel types, and Seismitoad can come in and really dent those. So keep that in mind. So you've got some good stuff going on here as far as typings, and just kind of they fill a lot of roles. Togekiss can be a good defogger for your team. Seismitoad can be a rocker, a defensive, can click toxic, be a defensive wall, help you beat Draco Vishers out there in the metagame, and Togekiss on the flip side can help you beat all the Conkeldurs out there, help maybe Thunder Wave, Paraflinch, you can be that guy, and Paraflinch your way to victory. So I want to talk about what kind of team you can fit these tank archetypes into. So you really can't fit them into pure stall. It's a little tricky. You maybe could if you really forced it, but these really will fit better in maybe a semi-stall, but they're really at home in bulky balance and true balance teams. These kind of cores are going to be right at home for all the reasons I talked about earlier, where you can just come in, not give up all your offensive pressure, but still be the defense Pokemon you need to be. They're going to be really good fit for balanced style teams. They can even be the defensive backbone of a bulky offense team, which is pretty cool. If you wanted to play offense, which is kind of more where I reside as a bulky offense type player, I like to form these tank cores and then just fall back on them when I need them, but then still be able to keep up offensive pressure and then rely on wall breaking and sweeping and cleaners for the rest of my team. So these tanks can be my defense, and I'm still playing an offensive game plan. So I really reside in that space personally, but you can decide what's a good fit for you. So finally, how do we support the defensive core? This is going to be kind of important for us, I realize, so we're going to talk a little bit about it. How do we support the defensive core that we have built? So I think the first thing we want to think about is, are there any roles maybe that could support your defensive core? For example, between Alomola and Snorlax, you're pretty weak to status effects, so maybe a Cleric would be a really good partner for that core. So maybe I can find a Pokemon, maybe like a Togekiss, for example, that can offer Heal Bell, but do other things as well, something versatile, something like that. Maybe your tank core doesn't really have any kind of recovery, so in that case, maybe a Wish Passer could be really helpful. Maybe a defensive pivot like a Rotom Wash could be nice to try to bring a Pokemon in, so that you still have that pivot action and you feel okay about it, and you can make more safe middle ground plays when you need to in the match. I think the other kind of on the other side of the spectrum, if we're not going to support it defensively, can we find offensive ways to support it as far as what is our win con here in the long game? So how are we gonna win this game offensively? If so, what kind of offensive pressure would this team really benefit from? So if your Pokemon are all kind of like pseudo weak to Conkeldurr, for example, maybe you find a Pokemon like nothing comes to mind off the top of my head, but just something that really pressures and beats Conkeldurr straight up, like a Tornadus Therian or something or other that just really pressures Conkeldurr. So then That's kind of more of a good offensive partner. But then also, you've also occupied the role of pivot in the case of Torrentee or something like that, where you also can pivot. If Torrentee is, let's say, threatening stuff, it's a really good offense Pokemon, but now something comes in that beats it, you can U-turn on out of there, bring in your defensive Pokemon, and all of a sudden you've made a really good Pokemon play. Finally, with this core benefit from more defensive pieces, we talked about this a little bit earlier as far as clerics and wish passing and whatnot, but just kind of keep in mind, like, maybe I want to play a more defensive playstyle, and keep in mind also, the more defensive pieces you add, the more you're just playing like a true stall team or a stall team or a semi-stall or maybe a bulky balance. So if your defensive core is like 4 of your Pokemon and you have maybe 1 wall breaker and 1 sweeper, and then you have 4 defense Pokemon, you're really playing a bulky balance team. That's just kind of how it is. So just keep that in mind. If you know what kind of and you can go either direction. You can start with the archetype and then flesh out the Pokemon, or you can start with the Pokemon and then flesh out the archetype. You can go either way. Just matters what works for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys found it helpful. I love making these videos for you guys. They're kind of a fun time for me to reflect on what I know about other Pokemon. Hopefully I can share with you guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click the subscribe or like button down below. It is always really appreciated. Drop a comment in the comment section below. Make sure to join our Discord, where it's starting to get hopping in there again, which is nice. People are talking now that the videos are coming back. So make sure you guys go ahead and join that. Until next time, I will see you guys later. Krakenation out.